Welcome to the Capitol News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is November 20th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. Impeachment Hearings Day number 4. I don't know if the word bombshell is the correct word to use, but there was, I think, some damning testimony from Ambassador Gordon Sondland, the ambassador to the European Union, pretty much against Donald Trump. I think that his testimony this morning was a surprise to both the Democrats and the Republicans. His opening statement was a lengthy opening describing sort of his professional background and also his role in the administration as an ambassador to the European Union and his role as it related to Ukraine as well. Recall, Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. Ambassador Sondland is already busy dealing with 27, 28 nations that comprise the European Union, and he is also involved in this matter. Now, tangentially, because perhaps Ukraine is interested in becoming a future member of the European Union, you can say, okay, tangentially, this is part of Ambassador Sondland's portfolio, so maybe it makes some type of sense that he would be involved in this matter. That's a stretch, but we can say, for the sake of argument, that's okay that he can be somewhat involved. He's definitely not the main person in all of this. Again, I still think that rises to Rudy Giuliani and perhaps maybe some others, but Donald Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, I think is center stage on all of this, and this is what we had stated from the very beginning, because something just did not sit well with me, and it still doesn't, because there are still a lot of unanswered questions as to what the actual role and duty and mission that Rudy Giuliani was on. And we know that a couple of his associates, Igor and Lev, have been arrested by the FBI. And we know that Gordon Sondland is not a career diplomat from the Foreign Service and the State Department. He is a political appointee because he donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inaugural committee. Now again, this does not need to raise eyebrows. This is what happens. Wealthy individuals give a lot of money to campaigns and inaugural committees all the time, and they are rewarded with ambassadorships or some other type of position within an administration. Okay, this happens all the time. But the fact that Donald Trump is using his personal attorney, a private citizen, which has been testified to by a handful of the witnesses that have thus far come forward and testified publicly, that Rudy Giuliani is a private citizen and the personal attorney for Donald Trump. And then he has his associates, Igor and Lev, who have been arrested by the FBI. And again, to an extent, you have Ambassador Sondland involved as well. In his testimony, his opening statement, Ambassador Gordon Sondland testifies that there was a quid pro quo for a White House meeting with Ukraine. And he also believes that the foreign aid is also tied to this as well. Now, we're going to get to this because this was a showstopper for both sides of the committee. Of course, the Democrats loved this opening statement, absolutely loved it, because finally we have somebody who has some type of firsthand knowledge, who is intimately involved with Ukraine, with all of these discussions, or at least with some of them, who has had conversations with Donald Trump and presumably with Rudy Giuliani, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, Rick Perry, and Mick Mulvaney, which turns out, yeah, there were conversations with these people as well. Everybody was in the loop. Everybody was in the loop. Now, you're going to start splitting hairs because when it got time for the minority, the ranking member, the Republicans, the ranking member, Devin Nunes, representative from California, he was dumbfounded. His questions were terrible. Honestly, they were terrible. They got nowhere in the early opening 45-minute session that were split between the Democrats and the Republicans, where you have Chairman Adam Schiff and the Democrat Council that has 45 minutes, and then it goes to Devin Nunes and the Republican Council for their 45 minutes. Devin Nunes and the Republican Council, Counsel Castor, their questions were terrible. They were dumbfounded. They were caught completely off guard that Ambassador Sondland was going to give the opening statement that he gave. And remember, we said this yesterday, that we didn't know what he was going to do. Would he come out and plead the fifth? Or would he just sort of spill his guts? Well, to an extent, he did the ladder and spilled his guts. However, there was some wiggle room. And after that 45-minute session from both sides, there was a recess. When they came back, it was for the 5-minute sessions for the individual members of the committee to question Ambassador Sondland. And some of the Republican congressmen and women were able to sort of find a window of opportunity to exploit, to sort of give a little bit of a defense to Donald Trump. And this very well could have been some crafty or clever lawyering on behalf of Ambassador Sondland's attorney, his counsel, that says, okay, tie the quid pro quo to a White House meeting, meaning President Zelensky is going to come to the White House because that is going to show a sign. It's symbolic. That's what it is. But nevertheless, it's an important sign, especially very early on in President Zelensky's new administration, because this is a guy who was elected to fight corruption, to be transparent, to quote-unquote drain the swamp that exists in Ukraine. And it is known globally that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries and governments in the world. Okay, there's no disputing this. We all agree with this. There's nothing to really discuss or debate there. But having President Zelensky come to the White House was something that pretty much everybody in the National Security Council, the Department of Defense, and the State Department were in agreement on. That, yes, President Zelensky, we have vetted him. We all think that he is going to be true to his word, that he is a straight shooter, that he is authentic, and that he is truly going to tackle corruption, and he is going to be more transparent. So Donald Trump, we are advising you to schedule a meeting here at the White House to show the people of Ukraine that the United States is in agreement and is supporting President Zelensky, and it also would send a message to Russia, back off, because we believe that this guy is going to be an ally to the United States. Now, there was pushback on this. Why? Because Donald Trump has been convinced, and we can only make the logical assumption that this is based off of what Donald Trump has been hearing from Rudy Giuliani and Levin Igor, that Ukraine does not like Donald Trump, and that Ukraine has a vendetta and wants to take Donald Trump down. Well, that's all Donald Trump needs to hear, because if it's about him, you got his undivided attention. And so I don't trust Ukraine. They're corrupt. Again, we know that they're corrupt, but now it starts to become, okay, I'm listening to Rudy Giuliani and these two guys, Levin Igor, who have been arrested by the FBI subsequently. And meanwhile, I have my Defense Department, I have my National Security Council, and I have my State Department all telling me that this would be a prudent move. And he goes with the two guys that have been indicted and arrested by the FBI and his personal attorney. Okay, until we get to the fact that, well, you know what, maybe this is a point of leverage to get something done, because Donald Trump is also continues to have it in his mind that the energy company Burisma needs to be investigated. And of course, conveniently for him, this is a company that is associated with Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, or conversely, this Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are associated with Burisma. Okay, of all of the companies in Ukraine, of all of the corruption that has taken place and continues to take place in Ukraine, what Donald J. Trump focuses on is a company that has itself linked to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Joe Biden just happens, it's just a coincidence, folks. That's what you're being told to believe from the Republicans and Donald Trump and the administration. It's just a coincidence that Joe Biden is a political rival right now. And I've stated from the outset that just because you're a political rival, this does not exempt you from investigation. You can't just say, I'm going to run for president or I'm going to run for some type of office and now you can't investigate me. No. That is not an excuse. Not one whatsoever. We're going to get to this because we've talked about this before, trying to connect the dots in a logical manner. Because we have stated before, if Donald Trump is so concerned with Ukraine and is so concerned with fighting corruption, and he's so concerned with foreign aid and being a good steward of taxpayer dollars, then why did Donald Trump give aid to Ukraine in 2017 and 2018? Now, if I'm trying to be fair to Donald Trump, which I am because I'm trying to do my best to call balls and strikes here, because the only dog that I have in this hunt is for truth and justice. It's not about Donald Trump. It's not about Rudy Giuliani. It's not about Obama, the Clintons, Republicans, or Democrats. It's about the truth and justice. Put away the partisanship. That is what is dividing and destroying this republic. Get over it. Search out the truth. Keep an open mind. That's what I stated from the beginning. It was not just going to be about the transcript. There is going to be a lot more that we were going to come across. And we have come across a lot. Okay? So if Donald Trump is going to claim that he's so concerned about Ukraine and being a good steward with taxpayer dollars and really cut back on foreign aid, and we know that President Zelensky became the president because he was advocating for and campaigning on fighting corruption, then that means that the former administration in Ukraine in 2017 and in 2018 was therefore corrupt. Was there any indication, is there any evidence that Donald Trump had these meetings with his National Security Council, with his Defense Department, with his State Department, with Rudy Giuliani? Anybody? We got to hold up the aid in 2017 and 2018, because if there's evidence of that, then that would show, I think, a fact pattern in favor of Donald Trump and the administration, that I truly am concerned with taxpayer dollars, that I truly am concerned with helping Ukraine, but I got to do it if it benefits the United States too, that we're not wasting $400 million a year or whatever it is to the aid of Ukraine if it's just going to be wasted. I'm not going to do it. Well, if you had that evidence, don't you think that the White House would have released that by now to say, hey, here's a fact pattern. We've been holding this up since we've been in office. 2017, 2018, and 2019 is no different. The only thing that's different this time in 2019 is it's just a coincidence. It's just happenstance that Joe Biden is running for office, and there is a corrupt company in Ukraine with Burisma, and they're linked together. That's all it would be. And that would be a very hard argument for the Democrats to overcome, because it's showing a fact pattern that the Trump administration has done this consistently for the past 3 years. I have yet to see or hear that argument being made by Donald Trump, his attorneys, or anybody else for that matter. So they get the aid in 2017, 2018, presumably without any question. 2019 rolls around. Oh, wait a minute. Joe Biden's running for president. Wasn't his son involved with that Ukrainian energy company, Burisma? Yes, I think so, Mr. Trump. Oh, well. Or to the deal maker I am, this is called leverage, ladies and gentlemen. This is called leverage. I know Ukraine needs this aid. Everybody tells me they need this aid. I know that Russia's fighting them. I know that they got problems over there. I can use this for a political advantage, can't I? That, to me, is probably what was going through Donald Trump's mind. Now, what goes through your mind does not necessarily rise to a crime or any type of impeachable offense until it is put into action. Ambassador Gordon Sondland testifies there was a quid pro quo for a White House meeting, and is also tying it to the aid. Not looking good, because what we have been told by Donald Trump consistently, and for quite a while, persistently as well, is that there was no quid pro quo. Now, where the wiggle room comes in for the Republicans. Again, you had a few members of the Republican Party on the Intelligence Committee today, primarily Representative Jim Jacketless Jordan and Representative Turner and Representative Stefanik, coming up and saying, well, you know what? Gordon Sondland is making the claim. He is connecting the dots between a quid pro quo and a White House meeting. But with the Ukrainian foreign aid, he's not really making that claim as concretely, if you will. It's more, I'm presuming that it was also part of the quid pro quo. Now, why would he say that? Why would he presume that? Because it's logical to presume that, because those were the things that the administration, that the State Department, the Defense Department, the National Security Council were advising the president to do. Give them the aid, they need it, and give them an audience in the White House, because it'll be a good symbolic gesture. Those were the two things. It's basically, both sides of the coin. It's a package deal. But because he didn't tie it specifically, Gordon Sondland, to this, a few of the Republicans caught wind of this, and they said, okay, this is what we're going to exploit then. What you presume, Ambassador, we really don't care. It means absolutely nothing. Completely ignoring the other side of it, where he announces that there was a quid pro quo, but it had to deal specifically with the White House meeting. Now, I again think it's completely logical to assume that these were both sides of the same coin. It was both things. You can use both things for leverage because they're both very important to Ukraine and just the entire support structure for Ukraine. That you have an ally in the United States, that we're going to help you fight corruption, that we're going to give you aid to fend off the Russians. But nevertheless, to be fair to the Republicans, this is something that sort of can carry a little bit of water with the public that say, okay, well, he's another guy that can't specifically tie this either. Because what we did learn today, and this is no surprise because this is somewhat consistent with the other things that we've come across, is that it's not Donald Trump that is really giving all of these directives out. Talk to Rudy. Talk to Rudy. He knows everything that's going on. Talk to Rudy. Don't talk to me, talk to Rudy. He'll fill you in on all the details. And that's even in the perfect phone call on the 25th of July. That's what he says to President Zelensky on that phone call. Yeah, you'll talk to Rudy Giuliani. And I actually think, if memory serves me well, that President Zelensky is the one who brought up Rudy Giuliani. So how long has Rudy Giuliani been running around God's creation here? Okay? And Donald Trump said, yep, America's mayor. He's a good guy. He knows everything that's going on. Talk to him. So he's even telling Zelensky, talk to Rudy, have your people talk to Rudy, and all this, that, and the other. And that, by the way, was also mentioned in the whistleblower complaint. Now, of course, Donald Trump and the Republicans want to try to dismiss the whistleblower and that everything the whistleblower said was a lie. It wasn't. We have taken the time here on this podcast 2 months ago when it came out to read the transcript, to read the memo from the Intelligence Committee Inspector General. We took the time to go through all those documents. What the whistleblower stated turned out to be true. But Donald Trump doesn't care. The Republicans don't care. It's all politicized right now. He lied, and the whistleblower continues to have to come forward. That's their argument, and we're going to get to that too. So again, the Republicans found a little bit of wiggle room, and perhaps that was part of, again, the clever lawyering of the counsel for Ambassador Sondland. Link it up with the White House meeting, but you're just making a logical connection that it also had to do with the foreign aid. And if the Republicans pick up on it, good for them, and they can maybe exploit that to their advantage, which they did this afternoon. So you can kind of say, at least from a public perception standpoint, that in the morning it went to the Democrats, in the afternoon it went to the Republicans, because they were able to find a little bit of that wiggle room and sort of exploit that and take advantage of Ambassador Sondland's pretty much poor memory, not really being able to recall a whole bunch of details. He admits, Ambassador Sondland does, that he is not a prolific note taker, as are some of the many other ambassadors and other witnesses who have thus far testified. Some of them are meticulous note takers. Gordon Sondland was pretty much patting himself on the back for not being a note taker. But he also claimed in that he was not allowed to have any other type of notes that he may have taken, or phone call transcripts or meeting calendars. He wasn't allowed to have access to any of that stuff because the State Department and the White House weren't going to allow it. So again, we go right back to the argument of the Republicans claiming that nobody has firsthand knowledge. There's just not enough people right now who've testified that has firsthand knowledge as to what the president really wanted done. Well, you have nobody to blame but Donald Trump, because it's his administration that is withholding all of this information. In the same vein, the same Republicans are screaming from the rooftops that they want the whistleblower to testify. Why? Why do you want the whistleblower to testify if you're so concerned with firsthand knowledge? We all know that the whistleblower does not have firsthand knowledge. This was acknowledged by the whistleblower himself in his complaint. This was acknowledged by, I believe, the Inspector General. Everybody acknowledges this. You want to complain on one hand that you have no firsthand witnesses, but then you want to call a witness, the whistleblower, that has no firsthand knowledge. But then at the same time, you don't want to call out the administration to say, hey, release these documents, because, I mean, truly, if you're innocent, if you have exculpatory evidence, release it, and let's put this whole circus down. Let's close the tent. Let's pack it up. Let's leave. We're done. Nothing to see here, folks. Go home. That's not the case, is it? And I'll tell you what's also interesting. The silence this morning from the White House and from President Trump's Twitter feed was deafening. There was not a mention of anything. They had an oh-you-know-what moment this morning. Somebody's finally catching us. Now, another thing that sort of gave some wiggle room to Donald Trump and the Republicans was the fact that Gordon Sondland testified that on September 9th, there was a phone call between Gordon Sondland and President Trump where Sondland was trying to get to the bottom of everything and saying, "What, Mr. President, what is it that you want? What do you want?" Okay, again, this is September 9th, and the date's important. And allegedly, Donald Trump says, "No quid pro quo. I want no quid pro quo. I want nothing. I want President Zelensky to do what he said he was going to do. That's it. I want nothing." September 9th, right around the time when the whistleblower complaint became known. Actually, that day that the whistleblower complaint was known. This was sort of another oh-you-know-what moment for the White House. Hand being caught in the cookie jar. Because on the next day, September 10th, is the day that former National Security Advisor John Bolton resigns. Just a coincidence. Because you have a little bit of discrepancy there. You have Donald Trump claiming that he fired John Bolton, and you have John Bolton who claims that he quit. Is the timing coincidental? Because it's also from testimony of Fiona Hill, who I believe is testifying tomorrow. She was a senior advisor to the president, to the White House, on matters of Russian policy, and I think also European policy as well, but her specialty, I do believe, was in Russia. And she was told by former National Security Advisor John Bolton to keep a paper trail, talk to the necessary lawyers within the White House and the National Security Council, create a paper trail, cover your rear end, and stay away from Rudy Giuliani and this drug deal that he's concocting. So Ambassador Bolton knows that something is not right when it comes to Donald Trump and his allies with Rudy Giuliani and perhaps Igor and Lev as well. And who knows who else might be still lurking in the shadows. We just don't know right now. September 9th, there is that phone call. Trump says, "I want nothing, no quid pro quo." And he says that to Ambassador Bolton. I'm sorry, to Ambassador Gordon Sondland. The next day, September 10th, John Bolton resigns. Fired, quits, makes no difference. He is gone, but we'll find out. We might find out what actually happened. Now, it's interesting because the next day, on September 11th, that's when the Ukrainian aid is released. Now, the Republican argument is that Donald Trump was withholding the aid because he was waiting to hear back from all of his professionals, all of his advisors, as to whether or not President Zelensky passed the smell test. Is this guy a man of honor? Is he going to be true to his word and to his campaign that he is going to out corruption and he's going to be transparent? Well, from the get-go and for quite a while, and this was testimony from Ambassador Volker and some others, that they wanted Donald Trump to move forward with this earlier. Okay? Donald Trump was holding off for a couple of reasons, in my opinion. One, because Rudy Giuliani was telling him that Ukraine doesn't like you, they're still corrupt, don't believe what the State Department and everybody else is telling you, don't believe them. And because there's leverage, we can use leverage here to get something out of this politically speaking. Okay, that's what I believe. All right, and Donald Trump has yet to throw Rudy Giuliani under the bus. And I believe the reason he has yet to do so is because he's still going, he's still on his feet, he's still fighting the next round, and because Rudy Giuliani knows where all the bodies are buried. So if he attempts to throw Rudy Giuliani under the bus, does he think Donald Trump is a hill worth dying on? And that's a question that's going to come up, I think, in regards to a number of other people, because, again, Gordon Sondland implicated Giuliani, Rick Perry, Mick Mulvaney, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Vice President Mike Pence, and John Bolton. So will these individuals step forward and testify? Because they all released statements today, or at least most of them did, saying, "Oh, no, I never had conversations with the president on this. I don't know all of the quid pro quo stuff, yada, yada, yada." Well, then come down, raise your right hand, and testify. Let's get this circus over with. Because this is history. This is serious. Ranking Member Devin Nunes, every time he opens his mouth to speak, it's always about TV and the ratings. This has nothing to do, Mr. Nunes, with TV and ratings. This has to do with the health of our republic, which is decaying, by the way. Thanks to you and thanks to the Democrats. You got to point the finger at all of them. Again, get off the partisan bandwagon. Get off of it. Put the country first. Find truth and justice. I don't care who you lock up in this. I don't care who's implicated. Nobody is above the law. But I can tell you that what has been coming out is a fact pattern and actions that do not look good for Donald Trump. And that's me calling balls and strikes. I don't have a personal vendetta against Donald Trump. I don't have a personal vendetta against Hillary Clinton and Obama either. But hey, at the beginning of this podcast, when I started this back in February this year, I was going after them because that's what the facts were telling us. That's what you go after. I wasn't going after them because they're Democrats and I don't like their policies. I went after them because I'm looking for the truth. I'm looking for justice. And you should be doing the same. And if you're not, if you're just playing partisan politics, then you should be ashamed of yourself because you're not a part of the solution. You're a part of the problem. So the Republicans are also making the argument that Donald Trump basically needs to be caught on tape, on video, with a signed confession in blood, saying, I hereby order you to commit bribery. That's, of course, ridiculous. I mean, if that was the threshold that we have to meet in our judicial system in this country, in our justice system in this country, then our prisons are going to be pretty empty. They're going to be pretty empty because Representative Jim Jacketless Jordan, he likes to come out there and say, hey, they didn't know about the quid pro quo, and we're going to get to that in a minute because there was subsequent testimony from another individual in the afternoon session. They didn't know about the quid pro quo, so you can't have a quid pro quo. And they received the aid. And President Zelensky never came forward with an interview or a comment stating that Ukraine was investigating Burisma and or the Bidens. Yes, Jacketless Jordan, we know. Because they were caught. Because the whistleblower complaint came out. September 9th. Then there's a phone call and Donald Trump is cranky, according to Ambassador Sondland, and says, no quid pro quo, I want nothing, I just want Zelensky to do what he said he was going to do. That's it, bye. September 10th, John Bolton resigns. September 11th, the aid is released. Interesting, isn't it? You believe in coincidences? Because you're going to have to if you're going to say that Donald Trump did absolutely nothing wrong here. He states on the phone call, the perfect phone call. He is asking a foreign leader to investigate a company that is tied to the Bidens, and he mentions Joe and Hunter Biden. He mentions them. And what we also came to find, and this sort of strains credibility, but this is what we find from yesterday's testimony from Ambassador Volker and today from Ambassador Sondland, that these two gentlemen, they were aware of Burisma, but they never made the connection that it had to do anything with the Bidens. So if you want to believe that, that's fine. But both of these gentlemen have come out and said, well, now hindsight, 2020, oh yeah, we would have raised objections. We wouldn't have gone through with what we did. This is not right. The president should not have done this. But we didn't know that Burisma was a code word that actually meant investigate the Bidens. That's their testimony. They didn't make the connection that Burisma had to do something with the Bidens, that the Bidens had something to do with Burisma. Donald Trump just magically, he just randomly pulled a company out of a hat. It was Burisma, and just coincidentally had to do with the Bidens. So it strains credibility, but that's their testimony. Again, Ambassador Volker and Ambassador Sondland, who are working closely on this matter. And of course, don't forget Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, the actual ambassador to Ukraine, who was removed because Donald Trump was informed by Rudy Giuliani, and I also believe by Lev and Igor, his associates, who have been arrested by the FBI, that Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch was trouble. She's a troublemaker. She doesn't like Donald Trump. She needs to be removed. And Donald Trump references her in the phone call on July 25th with President Zelensky. She's a bad carrot. She's a bad apple. She's got to go, and she's going to go through some things. Meanwhile, he says this on the 25th of July. She was removed on May 20th. So he still has it in his mind, Donald Trump, that he has to continue going after Marie Yovanovitch. And we did that analysis last week when Ambassador Yovanovitch testified last Friday. All Donald Trump had to do was say, thank you for your service, ma'am. I hear nothing but great things from everybody in the State Department. I want to move in a different direction, so I'm going to relieve you of your duty, but we're going to bring you back to Washington in the State Department, and we'll find another post for you. That's all he had to say. He didn't. He had to attack her. He had to go on a smear campaign. He even attacked her when she was testifying, live. Can't control himself. This is problematic. These are not the types of actions I want my president to exhibit. And again, I'm not blaming Donald Trump for all the problems that exist in this country. They're not his fault. Some of them are now, since he's been there for a few years, but not all of them. Again, he is not the disease, he is a symptom. When you have to go through 8 years of Clinton, 8 years of George W. Bush, and 8 years of Obama, guess what you get? You get Donald Trump. Somebody who's self-centered, arrogant, who thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread, no manners, divisive. I mean, this country is divided as it has been since the Civil War. He's no Abraham Lincoln. A divided house cannot stand. No, he's poking everybody in the eye, blaming everybody. And this guy is a father to a young son and has grandchildren. That's okay. Nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. So the Republicans, their argument, their defense, has some water because Gordon Sondland gave them some wiggle room. But it does stretch credibility and logic ever so slightly, because I do think it's two sides of the same coin. The White House visit and the aid are both important. Zelensky wants both. The Ukrainians want both. Donald Trump knows this can serve as leverage. He knows that Joe Biden could be somebody who could give him a run for his money in 2020. And he thinks he can possibly get away with this. This is just doing business. Nothing to see here. I mean, in essence, what this comes down to is Donald Trump, as an analogy, is sort of serving as sort of a mob don, a mob boss. He brings Gordon in. He says, hey, son, you're a good kid there, Gordon. We like you. Hear good things about you. You got a good reputation. We want you to stay on the straight and narrow. Keep up your reputation because we got big things planned for you in the future. But there's, something I want you to do. But I'm not going to tell you. Go talk to Tony. Of course, in this instance, Tony is Rudy Giuliani. What does Rudy Giuliani tell him to do? Well, hey, if there's going to be a meeting, if there's going to be something going on here with the Ukrainians, President Zelensky has to come out publicly and state that Ukraine is going to be investigating Burisma, which now everybody knows means the Bidens. Okay? And ahead of the curve again, we are here at the Capitol News, because I stated this last week when we were conducting some other analysis. I said maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump doesn't even care if there's an actual investigation. He just wants it on the record publicly that Ukraine is investigating Burisma so he can make the connection that Burisma equals the Bidens. Remember I said that last week? I was starting to scratch my head. I said, well, you know what? He just wants him to publicly state it. He might not even really care. In fact, he might prefer just that it be public. Because if there's actually an investigation, he's rolling the dice that maybe the Bidens are not guilty of anything. And if that comes out before the election and Joe Biden happens to be the nominee, then we got a problem. But if there's just an announcement, then President Trump can hang this over the head of Joe Biden and everybody else and say, hey, look, everybody, you really want this guy to be your president? He's under investigation by the DOJ and the Ukrainians that he's messing around over there for political favors, giving his son a lot of money and who knows what else. He'd hang that over your head. And it wouldn't be beneath Donald Trump to do so. He's been jerking us all around on a number of issues, particularly U.S.-China trade talks for 2 years. You think he wouldn't dangle this over our heads for a year? Saying Joe Biden's in big trouble, the Ukrainians are investigating? Well, we'll see. We'll see. Just wait a minute. We'll see. That would be par for the course. That wouldn't be an exception. That would be the rule. Don't suspend your common sense and your logic because you voted for the guy or because you're a Republican. I'm not hanging him. I'm not sending him to the gallows right now. I'm just telling you that it does not look good. There are still other people to testify. Maybe we'll get some more first-hand witnesses to come forward. I doubt it, but maybe they will. Maybe Pompeo will come forward. Maybe Giuliani will come forward. Maybe Ambassador Bolton will come forward. We'll see. But I'm just telling you, call balls and strikes. Call balls and strikes. It's what this country needs right now. It needs the truth. It needs justice. It needs people who are going to put aside the partisanship. Otherwise, we're doomed to fail. That's all I can tell you. Now, another defense that the Republicans have been making for quite a while is that there can be no quid pro quo if the Ukrainians didn't know that there was an issue or that there was a hold with the foreign aid. Well, we had Laura Cooper today testify in the afternoon session along with another ambassador from the State Department. She is a policy advisor with the Defense Department, and she testified this afternoon that her staff informed her that Ukraine knew about an issue with the aid prior to August 29th. August 29th is the date that the Republicans are using, that it became publicly known to the Ukrainians that there was an issue, that there was a hold when it came to the foreign aid that Ukraine was in desperate need of. 8/29, okay? Again, Laura Cooper, a policy advisor with the Defense Department, is testifying that her staff claims that Ukraine knew about an issue prior to this date of 8/29, August 29th. She is claiming that Ukraine called people within her staff, or that her staff is familiar with phone calls that took place on the 25th of July. Whoa, 25th of July. Bells going off? That was the same day that Donald Trump had a phone call with President Zelensky. You think maybe they knew right away that something was amiss? Something was askew? Maybe they were able to read between the lines? Maybe they knew there was a quid pro quo? Maybe they knew they were being gamed here? Because we know from former testimony from, I think, Ambassador Volker and others, that the Ukrainians were concerned that Rudy Giuliani was running around. What's the actual policy of the United States? Because Rudy Giuliani does not speak for the United States. And Ambassador Volker, he didn't know what was going on because he just thought Burisma was a corrupt company. He didn't put it together that it meant the Bidens. Same thing with Ambassador Sondland. But the Ukrainians knew Giuliani and company were running around over there. Who are we supposed to believe? Giuliani? Ambassador Volker? Ambassador Sondland? Who are we supposed to believe? This is the confusion that's out there. So that throws that into question now. And that was one of the big pillars of the Republican defense for Donald Trump, that the Ukrainians didn't know about this. They didn't know about it until later on, August 29th. Nope, Laura Cooper says her staff was aware that the Ukrainians were aware before this, because in her closed door testimony, deposition of Laura Cooper, she did not state this. So she amended her opening statement today to include this because she claims that her staff took the time to read her transcript, her deposition, when it was released by the House Intelligence Committee, and they said, oh, whoa, now you might not have been aware, but we were. And that is what she testified to. So if there needs to be follow-up, she can presumably send those people to testify to say, these were the dates, this is how we knew, and these people had the phone call, yada, yada, yada. So again, that's not looking good either for the argument of the Republicans. So they keep moving the goalposts, things get moved down. But again, there are still some strings for the Republicans and Donald Trump in the White House to cling to, but you're splitting hairs. You're splitting hairs as far as I'm concerned, because it's two sides of the same coin. The White House meeting and the aid, they're joined at the hip as far as I'm concerned, because it was for the same purpose ultimately, that the United States was standing side by side with Ukraine symbolically and financially and militarily. It was all combined. Now, the other thing, again, Donald Trump's statement on September 9th, no quid pro quo, I want nothing. Do you believe this? Do you believe that Donald Trump wants nothing? When does Donald Trump never want something, right? I mean, we had the podcast last week. I think it was last Tuesday, if memory serves me well. The Economic Club of New York. Remember that? Negative interest rates? He wants them. Give me that money. I want that money. Donald Trump always wants something. He wants that money. It's not made up money. It's your money. It's your savings. It's in your 401k. It's in your Social Security. It's your pension. It's your annuity. It's your insurance company trying to earn interest. So when you have to file a claim, they can make good on it. Nope, not good enough. Donald Trump wants it. It's all connected, folks, I'm telling you. And in other news, on Monday, Chairman of the Federal Reserve Jay Powell made a visit to the White House to meet with Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin. Who knows what they were talking about? But again, is it a coincidence that we are starting to see phase one deal go south, that it might not even take place? Maybe Steven Mnuchin and Donald Trump were saying, hey, Jay, how much ammunition you got left there, pal? Not much, Donnie boy. We don't have much. Not much. Why? Well, because there might not be a trade deal. That's the speculation that's going on out there. Again, folks, connect the dots. I tell you all the time, read between the lines. How many coincidences are there? Not too many, right? There's not. Things happen. Got to look at the dates. Got to look at the timing of things. And this is suspect to me. Because if this happens, there's no trade deal. I mean, how many points has been gained in the NASDAQ, in the S&P, in the Dow on the hopes that there's going to be some trade deal. We've been jerked around for 2 years, and the market continues to buy it. It continues to get bid up every time that there's a statement out there. Now, of course, a lot of this has to do with the liquidity that's being thrown into the system as well from the Federal Reserve, but nevertheless, it's that extra kicker. It's the extra kicker. So we'll see what happens. A lot took place today. I know I threw a lot of names out there. I know this can get confusing. There's a lot of partisanship out there. The Democrats want to spin it their way. The Republicans want to spin it their way. The president and the White House wants to spin it their way. There's a lot of spin. There's a lot of partisanship. There's a lot of emotions running high. People care about this country and they care about their party. Sad fact of the matter is, I think too many people care about their party above their country, and that is the problem here, and we've been facing this for quite a while. Again, I am not laying this at the feet of Donald Trump. He is a symptom. He is not the disease. Again, you have 8 years of Clinton, Bush, and Obama. This is what you get. Okay? This has just been amping up. We are going to be in the midst of an economic crisis soon enough. A financial crisis. We have the global protests taking place. This is not transitory. This is history. I think even this, a lot of this impeachment hearing, to be honest with you, is somewhat of a distraction too, but it doesn't mean it's not legitimate. It can be legitimate at the same time. I mean, the evidence that's coming out is not painting a good picture for Donald Trump. And this whole fact pattern, this is consistent with what Donald Trump is. Everything that he states to President Zelensky on that perfect phone call on July 25th has nothing to do with broader Ukrainian corruption. It has everything to do with Donald Trump, how it affected him. 2016, how the DNC might have been, spying on him, this, that, or the other. And what's Burisma doing with the Bidens, my political rival? Everything that's going on and everything has to be centered around him. 2017, 2018, the A goes. 2019, Joe Biden's running. Hey, we got to see what's going on. Little sketchy, little suspect. And again, you want first-hand witnesses? Then come on down, Mr. President. Come on down, Mr. Giuliani. Raise your right hand, swear in. I can guarantee you, you will have an audience. And if you have exculpatory evidence, provide it to us. Provide it to us so we can stop this infighting, so we can get over this and start solving the many issues that we have here in the United States of America. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out, and leave your comments. We do love hearing from you. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.